O'Rourke, who last time he ran for anything lost to Ted Cruz down in Texas, has announced this morning he is running for president in 2020. It's 2019, so let's bring in Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, and host of a brand new podcast called Newt's World. Newt, good morning to you.
Good to be here.
All right, so what do you think about Beto?
I think it's a free country, and everybody should follow their destiny, and his destiny is to keep losing.
The Vanity Fair sees the JFK quality in him, sees the likability of Jimmy Carter, the oh shucks Jimmy Carter attitude. Do you see the same thing?
I don't know. I mean, does Beto carry empty suitcases? Which Jimmy Carter did to prove he was.
Did he really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
His suitcases were always empty.
Oh, okay.
But he felt like a common guy. You know. Look, I think Beto O'Rourke is one of the great examples of the left talking itself into hysteria. This guy gets, what, $80 million, runs against Ted Cruz, and loses. At which point the left goes, boy, that was a great race.
But he got close in Texas, which has not been blue in a long time.
Right, it was very exciting. He got close, but I just want to make the point. And he loses. Now, he can't carry his home state, and he wouldn't carry his home state against Trump.
Right. And also, the other component to that race was the fact that Ted Cruz only had 40 million. He had 80, but nonetheless. So, but what about his 3 terms in the House of Representatives? We had Leader McCarthy on talking to Brian a little while ago. He didn't remember him ever getting anything done.
Well, look, I think that Lincoln only had 1 term in the House and lost the Senate race and ended up as an amazing president. Maybe that'll happen to Beto O'Rourke, but I somehow doubt it. I love the line, I think it's in the Vanity Fair piece, where he says, I was born
to do this.
I thought, there's a certain ego illusion here that the planet had that magic moment and Beto O'Rourke showed up
well,
to
they
save
probably
us from
all
ourselves.
have to have a little bit of that ego in order to run for president of the United States. But
I've never heard any candidate
other people talk about that.
Say I was born. Even Obama and Trump, who are fairly strong egos, I've never heard either one of them go, I was born to do this.
What's your prediction of the Democratic Party, though? Are they going to vote for someone like him, or are they going to vote for someone like a Joe Biden?
I'm unequivocal. I'm for Kamala Harris.
Why?
African-American woman, largest state in the country, has a great story. I think she's a very effective campaigner, and I just think she'll end up being the nominee.
Well, that's interesting. I know you don't agree with this, but you know that she is getting rid of private insurance. You know she wants to.
Oh, I didn't say she'd win a general election where issues
but you
matter.
just think she's going to emerge.
I think in a Democratic
And you're not saying you'd vote for her.
No, in a Democratic primary, there's nothing nutty enough to disqualify you.
Okay. It's way out to the left. Got Rahm Emanuel among Democrats who are concerned about it. Yeah. They see the same thing.
Rahm is the guy who masterminded their 2006 national victory in the House. And Rahm understood you'd better be a broad enough party that you can represent a whole country. I don't think some of these people quite get that.
Newt, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. It is brand new. It's called Newt's World. It's available wherever you get your podcast, or at what? newtsworld.com.
Yeah. Well, I mean, basically, and we've known each other a long time, I like to learn and I like to teach. And podcasts give you a chance to have, you know, a real conversation. The first one we did was on George Washington. We did a great conversation with Patrick Kennedy talking about his addiction and dealing with being an addict and his family and mental health issues. It was really a great conversation. So this lets me go beyond politics and beyond this morning's stories and really look at things that are interesting.
They say this is the golden age of audio. The podcasts are going through the roof. Do you find it rewarding to sit there and talk without time limits?
Well, yeah, but I used to be a college teacher, and I thought 50 minutes was a reasonable long time. So, I'm not saying my students did, but I did.
Right.
And I like doing it. And the one we're going to do on Sunday is about 5G and this whole new technological revolution. So it lets you talk about anything you want to and be much more broad than just talking about politics or whatever the news of the day is.
All right. Welcome to Newt's World. Check it out.
You sold me. I'm going to download it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chinese red storm no longer just rising, it is here. The Wall Street Journal today reporting that the United States Navy and contractor are, quote, under cyber siege by Chinese hackers, and the national security secrets stolen threaten America's standing at the world's as the world's top military power. There's no way to excuse this act of cyber terror by the Chinese, who are intent on becoming a dominant force on a global scale. Even the Obama doctrine viewed cyber attacks as acts of war. When warranted, it said, the United States will respond to hostile acts in cyberspace as we would to any other threat to our country. We recognize that certain hostile acts conducted through cyberspace could compel actions under the commitments we have with our military treaty partners. We reserve the right to use all necessary means, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, as appropriate and consistent with applicable international law in order to defend our nation, our allies, our partners, and our interests. The failures of previous administrations, along with former Defense Secretary James Mattis, contributing to the lack of American cybersecurity. By 2021, a staggering 3.5 million cybersecurity jobs are estimated to be vacant in both the private and the military sectors. The Trump administration's 2020 budget requesting $9.6 billion to enhance the Defense Department's cyber mission. That's just a little more than 1% of the total defense budget. Clearly, more is needed. Let's bring in Fox Business national security and foreign policy analyst Dr. Waleed Phares and Fred Fleitz, national security expert and president of the Center for Security Policy. Fred, would you call this an act of war?
Absolutely, David. This is an act of war that is seriously undermining U.S. national security. It is stealing a technological edge that the U.S. taxpayer has spent billions of dollars to develop and makes us much more vulnerable to China. And it raises real questions about these trade talks with China. We are at war with China. I mean, this is an act of war. And how can we trust China in these trade talks when we see such a massive attack on our military secrets?
Waleed, I would advise everybody watching this to read this Wall Street Journal piece. I mean, it is extensive. It is well reported, well researched. They quote one senior Navy official as calling this a deadly virus, what has been happening to the U.S. Navy. And I'm quoting here this senior official, if we don't do anything, we could die. That's pretty plain.
Pretty plain. Actually, the bigger question I'm asking right now, let me say the other question, is what is China doing? Why is China conducting those attacks specifically in terms of espionage? We know that, it's everyday reporting, but now targeting electronically our Navy, because China's expansion sphere is only in the Pacific. The only force in the Pacific that is blocking China from Japan to South Korea to Taiwan to the Philippines is the U.S. Navy. We are all over the place, and this is where they want to expand, because China, as we all know now, is outside China. It's in East Africa, it's in Latin America, so we have to understand what the Chinese are trying to do, and of course we need to design a counter strategy. Some of it, not all of it, should be a counter-electronic measure, but there are other fields we can confront this expansion as well.
Well, and Fred, for a long time, we were just thinking it's just the South China Sea. We understand that they have imperialistic instincts with regard to the South China Sea and taking over that part, maybe with plans to take over Taiwan, to move into Korea, perhaps, maybe even the Philippines. But this goes beyond that. In fact, one of the things that this report reveals is that they stole secret plans that the Navy had to build a supersonic anti-ship missile for our submarines. I mean, this is key warfare that they have stolen from us that we need not only to defend the South China Sea, but everywhere else we're involved.
Yeah, that's right. And the problem with submarine defense secrets being stolen is that if there is a conflict with China, we're going to rely heavily on submarines because surface ships are increasingly vulnerable to missile attacks. We know China is building an anti-carrier missile, and we know that China to this date has very weak submarine defense capabilities. So this is a very serious breach.
Waleed, what do we do now? We know about the breach. We know how devastating it's been to our military. Not just, we've been focusing on the Navy, but I assume it's going elsewhere. And I assume it's not limited to the Navy. Do you?
No, it's not limited to the Navy at all. And they showed it very clearly what they're trying to do. They go to our private sector to steal information, obviously, but they target our military installations in terms of electronic warfare to see how far our defenses are working. But let's remember the Reagan times, when the Soviets started to build these long-range missiles and they almost were, beating us in that field, he went to space. So we don't have always to respond in terms of putting more money in the same field because they have more cash than we do. So we look at where are the weaknesses in the Chinese apparatus worldwide. As I said, they're spread very thin around the world. They are building bases. They are funding countries which basically in Africa, for example, were our allies. So we need to have a different strategy to confront them. And remember one thing, they're doing this once they saw us sending task forces around North Korea. That was the break-in moment, because after that they understood that if they're going to use North Korea against us, we will win and defeat the North Koreans, which prompted the negotiations with the Trump administration.
Fred, can we go further with these trade talks without addressing this within the trade talks or eliminating the trade talks until we get some kind of assurance that we have attacked their attacks against us?
It has to be brought up in the trade talks, but let me raise another point. This article said that the Navy was allowing our defense contractors to self-report their cyber vulnerabilities and violations. Think about that. These contractors were policing themselves.
Yeah.
We have 4 intelligence agencies charged with doing this and other agencies doing related work. Did they drop the ball here? I think that the president and Congress needs to immediately look into what happened here and why we spend billions of dollars in cyber defense and all these intelligence agencies. Why didn't they stop this?
And Waleed, we've got to be clear about who's responsible. Not only was this built up or totally neglected, the Chinese interference in cyber warfare during the Obama administration, but even the first part of the Trump administration as well, right?
It's true. It's one bureaucracy. After all, you don't change a bureaucracy overnight. So we need to have a good review of our strategic projects across the bureaucracies, and that needs a very tight cooperation between the White House, the administration, and Congress, which is not at the best right now.
Well, and it also needs money. I mean, we need to spend money in order to protect the United States. As this article pointed out, it's clear that we could die as a result of some of the cyber attacks that we're incurring right now from China. Fred?
That's exactly right. Bill Gertz with the Washington Times says that China has at least 100,000 cyber warfare officers, mostly with the Chinese military. They do war games to steal passwords and break into websites. The Chinese are very serious about this, and I think we're lagging behind.
And then you also have the deal with the so-called private sector in China, which of course is almost entirely controlled by the Chinese Communist government. There's nothing that a private company can do in China without expecting some kind of interference from the government to pursue its ends. And there you have Huawei, there you have all the other telecom groups, and et cetera, Waleed. And the question of how that fits into the trade talks has to become front and center right now.
You have summarized it very well. The private sector, the official private sector in China, is controlled by the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. But there is something else in China. There is this younger generation which is now tech savvy and is rising. And that's why the Chinese government is very nervous about what's happening on the inside, wants to control everything technological, because I assume that the next wave of change in China will come from that field.
Waleed, just sticking with you, and then a final word from Fred on this. Is it time to walk out of these trade talks because of this?
It's very possible. I do believe that there is a connection between China, North Korea, and the maneuvers on the ground and those attacks, cyber attacks. I think the negotiations with China and, of course, President Trump are the field where the president can move forward because he has skills in negotiations, but all is connected in my view.
Fred, it's clear from this Wall Street Journal article, it's been laid out for all to see what they have been doing. You called it warfare. I believe the Wall Street Journal, that's the only conclusion you can lead to after reading this article through. Isn't that grounds for walking out of the talks?
I don't think we should walk out of the talks. I think we should keep proceeding with the talks. We're making progress on a trade deal. But this element, as well as intellectual property theft, has to be part of the talks, or we're not going to be able to get a deal that's meaningful.
The future of our country is at risk. I mean, it's clear from what the Wall Street Journal has laid out for us. Fred, Waleed, good to see you both. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.